So good morning. I'm George Bruno, and I work for USDA APHIS Plant Protection and Quarantine out of Spokane, Washington. And I coordinate a lot of the weed biocontrol programs for APHIS in the eastern part of the state. And I was asked to give an overview of some of the invasive weed biocontrol programs that our agency is involved with here in Washington, and just talk about some of the work we do with various tribes to help manage some of their priority rangeland weeds and some aquatic weeds, but mainly rangeland, and that that can be problematic on tribal lands and throughout the region. So our agency is involved in various tribal outreach activities from time to time to support land managers in weed management. And as you can see, in this slide, we also work with a lot of students and youth groups where they can learn about weed biological control and other integrated weed management methods used in controlling invasive weeds. And in the past, APHIS has worked closely collaborating with Dan Fagerly, the WSU Extension Tribal Liaison Specialist in the region, and working on some tribal biological control workshops and field days with several of the tribes in the eastern part of the state here. The Colville Confederated Tribes, Spokane Tribe, and Yakima Nation. Those are the primary tribes that we work with on biocontrol. And we've also worked with Linda McLean, the WSU Extension Coordinator for the Colville Confederated Tribes, and she also organized a lot of the biocontrol meetings and workshops as well. So a lot of our agency's involvement in weed biocontrol in eastern Washington is coordinating with different tribal biologists and range managers and public stakeholders to help move around various weed biological control agents that we have available and that we collect from some of our APHIS established insectaries here in Washington to help deal with some of the tribes' invasive weeds of concern. Some of the core biocontrol program weeds that we're involved with at the present time are the knapweed complex, primarily spotted, diffuse, and Russian knapweed, and then Dalmatian toadflax and leafy spurge. And these are just a few examples of the types of invasives that are difficult to control because they're prolific seed producers and they have such a deep taproot compared to the shallow roots of a lot of our native plants and forbs. And so they use up most of the available water resources under extreme dry conditions and the extreme drought like we're seeing now across the western US, including here in Washington. It's a real problem in a lot of areas. So Washington's not in as bad shape as some of our neighboring states, but still we're in need of some good moisture, and we've had pretty good precipitation in the last couple of months. So that's a good sign, and hopefully that trend continues. Drought, it can give a competitive advantage to many non-native invasive weeds that we have in the area. A lot of our drought-tolerant weeds, such as Russian thistle, kochia, cheatgrass, like you see here, and other perennial weeds, are more troublesome under dry conditions, and so drought can make wildfires worse in some regions. Where I live and throughout many areas of the Pacific Northwest, where we have a lot of forest land intermingled with rangeland, particularly in some of our northern counties. And that's really typical in much of the tribal land here in Washington too. So we had, an exceptionally hot and dry spring and summer last year and the previous year, and also a high number of wildfires burning in the state, and that presented, some challenges to ranchers and producers and a lot of towns and communities, and so Linda McLean, she just addressed that and talked about a lot of the wildfires burning up in the northern counties. So the wildfires, they burn not only forest land, but also a lot of rangeland across the state, and with one of the largest fires occurring on the Colville tribal land, in north central Washington back in 2021, and they had some fires up in that area again in 2022 last year. So after a fire, there's a lot of open areas in the plant community, and if desirable native species aren't present to occupy those open niches, then the weeds are likely to move in and become established. So having some type of revegetation plan, in the recovery process, like seeding in desirable grasses and forbs, it's important. So biocontrol, that's an area APHIS PBQ could help out with in the recovery effort down the road and over the long term, particularly in sensitive type areas, if invasive weeds ever become established, at some of these sites affected by fire. And also when other integrated weed management strategies or methods, such as herbicide treatments or physical and mechanical control aren't feasible or suitable for a particular area, then biocontrol would be a good option at that point. Okay, this is our APHIS mission statement in regards to weed biocontrol. Most of our biocontrol programs are aimed at invasive weeds, but we have been involved with biocontrol of insect pests as well here in Washington, like cereal leaf beetle and Russian wheat aphid, which are both serious insect pests, primarily of small grains. And in years past, we've released biocontrol parasitoid wasps and predator lady beetles to help reduce the CLB and Russian wheat aphid with pretty good success. And there's also various pathogens like bacteria, fungus, rust, and others that work at suppressing weed populations too. But our biocontrol programs in the state mainly involve the use of insects, because insects, they seem to dominate as far as weed biocontrol is concerned. So here's one definition of biological control: the intentional use of one organism to control and or suppress another organism to reduce its abundance and negative impacts, such as noxious weeds. So the picture on the left is of leafy spurge aphthona beetles, and they cause a lot of damage to the plant by feeding on the leaves and plant tissues. And the flea beetle larvae also feed on the roots to further stress the plant. And then that's in the center there, that's a knapweed root borer larvae. And on the right is the colorful caterpillar or larva of the leafy spurge hawk moth, which defoliates spurge plants. So it's kind of a minor player. It plays a minor role in actually reducing leafy spurge population, but it's just another it's another bioagent that you find out in the field fairly often. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm just going to talk about one invasive weed where we've had tremendous success in some areas at controlling its spread, and that's leafy spurge. In past years, our PPQ folks, along with cooperators from Nez Perce Biocontrol Center in Lapwai, Idaho, Paul Bruson and his crew, and Washington State University personnel and some local area weed board cooperators have traveled to western Montana to collect these Aphtona beetles that attack leafy spurge. And we traveled to Montana because, first of all, they have a worse problem with spurge than we do here in Washington, and secondly, we're able to collect hundreds of thousands of these insects in a very short time.
George, you have about 4 minutes left.
Excuse me?
Oh, sorry, you have about 4 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. Won't take that long. And so most of our leafy spurge in eastern Washington is in Spokane County and a neighboring county, Lincoln County, but there is sporadic little infestations of leafy spurge in a lot of the northern counties as well. So a little bit about the plant. Leafy spurge is a deep-rooted perennial. It spreads by roots and seeds, and it can take over vast areas of ground, quickly decreasing forage for livestock and wildlife. And the plant can be toxic to cattle and livestock, and they generally won't eat it as long as there's other forage and pasture available. And I'll also mention that if you're hand pulling spurge plants, make sure to wear gloves, as alkaloids in the plant produced in the roots can be toxic if it enters your body through a cut or by some other means. So wearing gloves is always a good idea when hand pulling any type of weeds, and so I recommend it. And then sheep and goats can also be used to control the spread of spurge, and they aren't susceptible to poisoning from a lot of weeds like other livestock. Anyhow, this is an example of the kind of outbreak populations you see with this particular insect, and the spurge plants were actually bent over from the weight of the Aphtona beetles, and it was quite impressive. When the Aphtona beetles are this large, they just open up holes in the leafy spurge and start to spread out year after year as the insects proliferate and start to suppress the leafy spurge. So one year, our crew and PPQ Montana folks, about 10 in total, collected over 1 million of these flea beetles in one day. So in any given year, we always have success, which makes it a very productive and worthwhile trip. And not to mention, it's a lot of fun working with a great group of people, and it's usually a good road trip. And then we bring the beetles back to Washington and Idaho for release, and even ship them out to other cooperators in other states who are also trying to manage leafy spurge populations. And this is just a picture of a few of the beetles. There's Aphtona flava, Niger scutus, and lacertosa. Those are the 3 common species that you find in the field. So the field trip activity for Aphtona flea beetles collection, it benefits a large number of stakeholders throughout the U.S. and it's also a great example of the collaborative effort among several agencies and groups from different states, all working together in the battle against invasive weeds, and that's all I have. But it shows you, the vast quantities of beetles you can collect, and this is the aftermath after the beetles have done their work. So that's all I have.